Well, we're back again. More Library of Napoleonic Battles from Four Lost Battles here from OSG. This is the Dresden campaign designed by Kevin Zucker. We did Grossbeeren on the channel. You can go check that out. Now we're doing Katzbach, which is a much bigger scenario. Not necessarily from map area. As you can see, it's still only half a map sheet. But this is the 26th of August, 1813, and you can see that there are way more units on the map here. We've also got some Russians involved. These are those brown units here. More Prussians, more Russians, and then the French here, who've got sort of these stacks that are moving around. The French are going to get a big stack of reinforcements around midday, but they're going to get some reinforcements as the scenario goes along. This one is pretty not too complicated, not a lot of special rules. There are some new concepts here that were not in the last scenario, and we'll get into that. But essentially what you're looking at here is sort of a larger scenario. We've got commanders on the map now, so you can see we've got MacDonald. His values here. That one is going to be able to put a core commander within his range, which I think is 4 hexes, in command every command phase. So that means that as long as he sticks close to one of these leaders, they will always be in command, which is going to have, there's going to be a lot more agency, a lot less chaos in this one. On the Prussian side, we've got Blucher here, and he can actually put 3 units in command, 3 leaders in command, and obviously he starts here in range of Sakin and Vazelchikov is how I would pronounce that. But there are some other Russian leaders over here, Langeron down here. So it should be a pretty fun scenario to play through. And let's take a look now at sort of the strategic considerations. This is going to be pretty simple. We've got weather rolls in this scenario as well. It's going to be a lot more clear weather than we were used to in the last scenario. All right, so here's the strategic situation. We have 4 hotspots on the map. These 4 towns, villages here along the center of the map. This was a meeting engagement historically, both sides kind of advancing against each other with this river right in the middle of them. These spaces are worth victory points. So Weinberg right here is worth 3. Gross Janowitz is worth 5. That's going to be an important one. Schlaupe is worth 3, and Hermannsdorf down here is also worth 3. So basically, at the end of the game, you control these places, you get those victory points. We're also going to score points for eliminated units, a lot more units to go around now. Blucher and the Prussians have a really big command, and he's also being backed up here by Sakin's 11th and C Corps. And then obviously down here, Langeron and the Russians against Lauriston and his 5th Corps. So almost immediately there's going to be battle in this part of the map. The French, they have kind of a decision here. Do they want to go after Schlaupe, or do they want to try and drive through to Hermannsdorf? This seems like it's going to be a little bit tougher. There's the Russians have their first cavalry down here as well under Korff. This is maybe they go here. We'll have to make some decisions and see. That's probably going to dictate what happens here with York's 1st Corps, Prussian 1st Corps. Further up, we've got some advanced scouts from York's Prussians who are actually in supply because the supply train is here. And they're sort of, these are cavalry units, there's an infantry unit here, sort of guarding the river crossings. Obviously, I think MacDonald is going to want to have Girard make the attack here and try and cross the river. There's a couple spots where they can do it. Some of these units can march down this way. We can make an attack across the bridge, probably force that unit to withdraw, or at least withdraw here to the victory point hex to try and hold on as these guys move up in relief. There's a lot of interesting choices here where depending on where the armies move, the other army might move in a different direction. I believe the French do have the force advantage down here, and so the Prussian 1st is going to have to decide where they're going to defend. The real key here is 5 points, Gross Janowitz. That is going to be sort of a hot spot, and you've got some elements here of the 3rd Corps, Sebastini's Italians, coming down the road. And then you've also got way up here, you've got Suham's 3rd. They are probably going to take a while to join the battle, but they also have a pretty direct route to get over here. There's really no one who's going to stop them. And as we talked about, there's no coalition reinforcements coming in. So there's only going to be more French pouring onto the map. Managing the traffic flow is going to be really important. And I think, as the French, I believe historically, they tried to get across the river as quickly as possible before Blucher could arrive, and then Blucher's army basically forced them into a mass retreat, and they had a disaster trying to cross the river, retreating the other way. So I think for the French, speed is of the essence. They need to get done what they can get done quickly. There's 2 objectives on this side of the river. You know, MacDonald might think maybe about, instead of trying to cross here, coming down this way and overpower these objectives. We'll see as it unfolds. It'll really depend on the command roles that we get. A lot of the leaders in this scenario are somewhat better, especially on the coalition side, I believe. So over here, he's a 4. He's a 4 as well. So they're going to have a lot more agency on this side. And I think we actually have, I forget what they're called. I believe Sakin here. He is what's called, what do they call? What's the name of that? That is called, it's a special kind of commander. It is called a commander officer, is what that is. Commander officers have a command range of 4 as well. And he always has to spend his first command point to put his own formation in command. But once he does that, he's allowed to put other formations in command. So he could then, put that guy in command. There's a lot of command solidarity here with the coalition. You know, their only problem is that Langeron's a 2, and so he's going to be very hard to activate until Blucher or Sakin gets across the river in range of him. So that's kind of an interesting wrinkle as well. On the French side, they've got pretty good corps commanders, and obviously we've already talked about MacDonald. So, this should be an interesting scenario. I'm actually really curious to see when Sebastini comes in, because his command is at 5, which means he's probably going to activate almost every turn, which is kind of cool. So that's where we are, and I think we'll get underway with the French going first. All right, one other thing I forgot to go over about this scenario. So this scenario introduces the concept of march orders. We didn't have that in Grossbeeren, and we do have it here in Katzbach. Basically, a march order you can give to reinforcements when they come in, and this scenario also says and allows you to put one formation in march order. What march order is it's basically a secret order that you don't show your opponent. And you designate a specific hex, either a town or a bridge, has to be a town or a bridge, a specific hex for a specific formation to essentially march to. And even if that unit is not in command, they can move on their turn as long as they're moving closer to that march order. So what I've done here, obviously, when I'm playing solo, it's kind of defeats the purpose to have 2 hidden orders on both sides that I have to come up with, because then I know exactly where everyone's going. So I'm going to double blind it for myself a little bit, and we're not going to know where the march orders are going right away. And at least that provides me some sort of fog of war about what's going on. And so the way I'm going to do this, you can see I've marked these tokens. The formations that I have designated. So on the French side, we're going to do Suim because he's the furthest away. He's also got the worst command initiative, and so it's probably going to be the hardest to get him moving. So I want him to always move every turn, and he's also got the farthest to go, so it makes a lot of sense. On the Russian coalition side, I have designated Vasilchikov, because he's got a pretty good command, but he's also cavalry, and he's really fast, and he's also at the rear of the lines, and I want him going somewhere useful. Because Sakin can always put himself in command, that's not going to be as much of an issue. He's also got a smaller force. So what I'm thinking is I will use Sakin as kind of a mobile, versatile utility force where I won't commit him until I figure out where the hot zones are going to be. And I'll just kind of leave him in range of kind of all of these particular objectives, and he'll go where he's most needed. But Vasilchikov, he's going to be the guy who gets the march order. Now, in order to double blind this for myself, I've indicated objectives on the map where I think those units would be best sent in terms of where they're going to march. So for the Allied side, we're using the good old stoplight status. We've got green, yellow, and red. And I'm going to divide those. So green being the one that's probably most likely that commander would choose to go to, just given his position, his speed, and so forth. And so I'm going to roll a d6. When it comes time for him to activate for the first time, I'm going to roll a d6, and that is where he's going to go. So 1 through 3, he's going to go here. 4, 5, he's actually going to go to Weinberg and try and hold this bridge, and this is also a victory point space, obviously. And on a 6, he's actually going to take his orders and go here to Bromberg, and he's going to try and back up Langeron's L Corps down here. probably not ideal use for him, but if he does do that, that will free up York to head north. So there's a possibility here. I'm not going to know until he activates, and obviously because the allies go second, I won't know exactly where he's headed when I play the French turn. On the French turn, obviously, when Suum activates, I will know because I will roll for him. Now his objectives are a little different from where his positioning is. It doesn't make sense to have a sort of 6 objective down here. He would never come down this way. So what I'm deciding to do is say on a 1, 2, 3, 4, he's going to head here to Donau with his move command, and by that time he will want to get into battle formation because he's likely to run into someone up in that area. And on a 5 or a 6, he will actually try and come down to Weinberg, and he will try and take cross the bridge and take that particular objective, while Gerard and McDonald potentially try and push this way up to Gross-Janowitz. So that we'll know from the get-go, but I won't know what the response will be. This is a way to double blind the secret order system, at least initially, so that I can get some variability out of that particular feature of the game system. Highly recommend that anyone playing solo uses that as well if we're talking about march orders. You can also do march orders when reinforcements come on, and I may do that depending on how the battle unfolds. Of course, obviously, it's less interesting when there's only one faction who has to use them. There's only one faction getting reinforcements, and I suspect that those reinforcements are going to want to join up with their corps wherever they end up on the map. So anyways, wanted to explain that before we get started. Now we can get underway. So it turns out I have read the setup wrong. The setup diagram on the website with the updated setup is a little bit confusing in the way that it's visually laid out, but if I had been looking at the turn track, I would have seen that Suum actually doesn't start on the map here. He comes in at 12 noon when we check the weather again. So I don't even need to worry about Suum. I'm instead going to decide what force is going to be my march force, and I've already started moving here, but it's pretty easy. McDonald was able to put these cavalry in command, and so I'm thinking that hopefully we can get them up here. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll just modify it that way. It makes more sense that way if it's this sort of cavalry force here that can be in their march order. All right, we're all set. We're ready to go. I'll continue the French turn. All right, French have moved. This is where we stand after turn 1. They've come across the Plinsengrund, the small river there, and they've aligned themselves along this sort of streamline here. The cavalry, the attached cavalry from the First Corps here managed to capture this victory objective right off the bat. I'm counting on the fact that Langeron's not going to activate too often. I am a little concerned about Corps. If he's got cavalry down here who can come up and flank, that's why I tried to set some of this artillery behind this this crest right here, and you know, force the cavalry to go the long way around. If that happens, I'm going to need to respond somehow. I do have elements with McDonald coming down the road this way, and if they need to swing south, they can, but that would then, you know, potentially leaves Gerard in a situation where he is responsible for his units up here. We'll see how this goes. I'm not required to attack across bridges, so I don't have to attack there. I don't have to attack there. I do need to attack here, which is a 1-to-1 attack I'm not crazy about, and then I can choose to attack Langeron's units here, and I might do that because I've got a lot of force in this position, and I think Langeron is only sitting on, well, he's sitting on 8, so that would be at 12. Maybe I don't advance that far. Maybe I just advance to there, like that, because I don't want to be attacking an 8-strength infantry unit across. Let's see, what would I be bringing in? 7 and 5, 7, 14, 16 and 5, 21 to 12. That's 1.5 to 1. You know what? I'm going to be aggressive and try and do it. I am not playing with hidden units, but I am going to limit myself from looking at stacks unless I am within line of sight like normal. So I'm only going to be able to see the top unit. I think that's a fair trade-off for sort of the mechanical complexities of playing solo with hidden units. It was just a lot of counter manipulation I wasn't a big fan of. So yeah, and then up here, obviously, this poor cavalry, what is that, Ketzler, he is just absolutely surrounded. We've got combined arms against him here. He's not even, it's a stack of 2. It looks like some horse artillery in there. They're in clear terrain. They really don't have a retreat option out of this. If they have to retreat across this bridge, it's basically going to eliminate them. So feeling really good about that opening attack. And of course, this particular force who's under march orders is heading here. I've put the discs down. We'll see when it gets to the Allied side what happens. But let's go ahead and resolve some attacks, and then I'll come back after we've seen the coalition move and where this ends up. Okay, check in. After turn number 1, both sides have had a chance to go. As we expected, Langeron having trouble getting his units in command, maybe thanks to the extremely fast advance of Loristan's 5th Corps coming down the road. Corps ended up putting his light cav over here on the flank just to defend against any possible surrounding attempt. The French attack obviously forced some units out. We had to do it. We had to actually this unit from this. Oh, actually, you know what? He didn't. He did not have to do a forced attack because he was in a town. He can just sit right there. And so what we ended up happening was we forced Lafitte back across the creek. Here's what everything looks like. We didn't have an attack here across this bridge. That would have been stupid. And in pretty good position there for the most part. You know, he's holding this creek line, but I don't know how long that's going to last. Over here, Vasilchikov's corps, C Corps, they actually rolled. Unfortunately, they had a 50% chance of going up here, and they didn't. They rolled going to Weinberg with their movement command, and so that's where they're headed. Meanwhile, Sakin is going to take this position up here. He's going to try and get there, but I doubt he's going to be able to get there before that cavalry arrives. And then finally, York, he is all spread out. He left a detachment here at this bridge near Bromberg, just in case the French get any ideas. They got to be careful as well if the French don't slip across here if they're able to displace these units. But in general, they're heading up to protect Weinberg as well. The cavalry up here actually retreated from an artillery barrage before an attack could be made. Maybe I shouldn't have made that barrage, as it turned out. But they're out of command as well, and this one's holding this bridge. Likely we'll see an attack across there next turn, and we might see an attack against this unit here if we can get some of these units across this creek and into position. So the French basically pushing as much as they can, and Blucher and his command trying to catch up. Actually, I don't think I moved Blucher. I did not. So let's fix that before we continue. But anyways, this is kind of the end position. All right, now we're all fixed. Blucher is moved. Basically, he's going to have York's Corps try and hold this river line here, basically from Bromberg up to Weinberg, and essentially respond where he's going to need to respond. So it looks a little bit chaotic right now. Managing the traffic flow up this road has been hell for York. He's very disorganized right now, and the same is true over here as well with the 11th Corps under MacDonald. That's Gerard. Really, the only folks who are ready to fight was down here, but this is going to shape up nicely over the coming hours. So, stick around. Well, things could not have been worse for the French on that turn whatsoever. First of all, we got mud weather, so everything is slowed down. It has really fucked up especially Gerard's plan to try and get across here, do some artillery bombardment. That's all messed up now because of the mud. Secondly, down here, the 5th Corps under Lauriston was out of command this turn, and it could not make the maneuvers that it wanted to. It was repulsed last turn on this river line by Langeron, and so essentially now just sitting around in the mud and not able to make an advance. They were going to try and flank around this way. It's a disaster. Well, not a disaster, but it's very hard to get Suam's column on the map because there's in road march, and there's just not enough space for them. I guess conceivably I could have done it so they weren't in road march. I might go back and do that and rejigger that. We had the rest of the cavalry come along here. There you can see they're in here like this. About the only thing that went right for the French on their half of the turn was they did manage to get Gross-Janowitz under control, and this cavalry unit is kind of standing sentry over here. And Gerard did an attack that actually forced its way across the river here outside the town of Weinberg, but it's going to be pretty tough to make any more progress than that given the amount of forces that Blucher and York have driven north to protect that particular area. And C Corps here has taken the southern end of the town, which is the victory point space, so they're essentially waiting for someone to cross right here and destroy them. So it's just really not going well. The one thing I keep forgetting to do is the stacking. So to stack units costs an extra movement point, and I have been forgetting that a lot. And so I am not going to try and go back and fix it, but I'm going to try and start remembering to do it now. And I think I forgot to do that a lot in the last game as well. It's a really subtle rule, but yeah, units cost an extra movement point to stack with another unit. So it's kind of annoying that I've forgotten that. So perhaps the marching has been a little bit more efficient than it should normally be, but I'm not going to worry about it. Well, all right, now we have some dramatic action going on. The French making a huge push here. They Lauriston was able to finally reorganize his forces, get them into a position to attack, and do attacks where they were at least negating this creek or potentially had really good odds. So first up over here, we had Puteaux and Penne, and they ended up actually attacking across into the town of Hennersdorf here. I'll explain why all these guys have demoralized. They ended up attacking across the river into Hennersdorf. There was a brutal hand-to-hand combat through the town, and that resulted in Bernardos being completely eliminated. And that is a 6th strength point infantry division that was eliminated in that town by the French attack. That had a couple of effects. One, it allowed the French to get across the river and really mess up Langeron's plans. But 2, it also demoralized El Corps. They're a pretty brittle corps, and the elimination of that unit has now further demoralized the other units of Langeron's group. We did another attack here, the cavalry coming out of Schlaupe, and an attack. We moved across the river and ended up splitting an attack in this direction. Even though the units were taking cover in that town, they ended up being displaced pretty far. The attacks both went really well for the French, and they moved in and have secured the bridge now here across the river to the plateau, across the Katzbach. We've pushed the infantry here up onto this hilltop. They're demoralized. They're in a kind of a bad way. And I believe, 1, 2, 3, yeah, this guy's going to be out of command. There's just no way to get to him from Langeron's position. So now there's a situation down here. The French have secured their objective. That's 3 victory points at the end of the game if they can hold it. And they risk actually destroying El Corps here, as well as the 1st Cav. So there needs to be a regroup here, and this is exactly why I left Blucher sort of to the rear of York. Just in case some of these stacks need to reposition and get into a spot where there can be a counterattack mounted. That will involve York coming back down, where he's got units up here as well trying to hold this bridge. But that attack that the French launched here, where they were across the river on this turn, they launched an attack here into the town of Weinberg. It did not go well, even though they outnumbered these cavalry units. They had to retreat back across this bridge. That actually eliminated one of the Meunier, one of the infantry brigades that Girard had sent across, which is not good. So that is counting against the losses for the French, and it's looking like, unless there's some help up here, it's looking like the coalition's going to hold Weinberg, at least for a while. Now, there is hope if we can get Suham's command and Suham's corps down here. We might be able to attack from the north, although the coalition did attack here near Gross-Janowitz. This was Sakin, who managed to find his way up there. So there's going to be some skirmishing along here, especially with cavalry, before we can even think about doing something here. But it's a really interesting battle so far. French enjoying success in the south, coalition enjoying success in the north, and we'll see who breaks first. I'm also happy to report that I went looking to see what the next game chronologically would be after 4 lost battles, and it turns out that it's actually Napoleon at Leipzig, which I own, which is huge, by the way. It's a huge 2-mapper, and then there's also a Hanau scenario in there, but lots of units. But in there, I did find, I was just complaining about there not being a sequence of play, a player aid in the box. I guess some of the older games in the system actually did have a sequence of play player aid, so I pulled it out of Napoleon at Leipzig, and I'm going to use this to make sure I'm doing everything properly. But this is a nice detailed player aid. This is what I was looking for in the box for 4 lost battles. I'll have to check and see if maybe it's on the, because this was on the reverse side of the order slips. I wonder if it's on the reverse side of the order slips in 4 lost battles as well. Anyways, happy to find that. Well, the coalition, after much consideration and kind of going back and forth, i.e. me not being able to make up my mind, knowing what happened to Girard's sort of offensive here across the river and knowing what's going on down here, I decided I'm going to take a bit of a risk with the Prussians, or sorry, with the Russians, excuse me. So Vasilchikov decided that he was going to cross the river here in force, and he's going to attack the Italians that were pulling up. The reason he's doing that is because there's a town hex on the other side of this bridge, and once they get in there, it's going to be real hard to dislodge them. You know, he thought maybe just hold the defensive terrain and make them cross, make them attack across. But their thinking is, if they can drive Girard's corps off, they can potentially come down around behind Lariston, or even capture some of these baggage trains. It's a bit of a gamble, I understand, but historically Blucher did order a full attack, and so we're going to try it. And then up here, Sakin is going to try and take control of Gross-Janowitz with his with his 11th Corps. Now, he doesn't have a ton of units, and not all of them are ready, but he was able to get in range of this out-of-command cavalry unit here, and it's a 1-to-1 attack. The cavalry might retreat before combat, or it might not. I'm probably going to hold it there to defend just because the rest of the corps is coming up behind. It just needs to hold out. But a 1-to-1 attack is not terrible odds in this system, and I think if I can get it, I don't lose much if I lose it. I probably just have to retreat 1, and then Sakin's available next turn to get everyone going. So we'll see what happens, and I'll come right back. Well, Sakin's effort at Gross-Janowitz left a lot to be desired, obviously fully repulsed there, but he's going to try again next turn in full battle formation. It was a lot better over here where C Corps across the river made an attack, actually eliminated Zuki's brigade due to forcing a retreat across this bridge. The 3rd Artillery here of the 35th Division also had to retreat. It did survive, but now Girard is in a very precarious position, as is MacDonald for that matter. They have got to figure out what they're going to do about this, because now C Corps is free to kind of either attack this really weak cavalry unit or, cause a lot of havoc here in Girard's rear line. So it may be time that he pulls back and reforms so that Lauriston is not also in trouble. Well, it is all good news for the coalition allies this turn. Vasilchikov launched an attack here with some of his cavalry. He moved in some reinforcements to Schlabhof, managed to drive off this artillery regiment pretty far, and that allowed the cavalry to advance after that combat. Displaced MacDonald, almost captured him actually. On a 6 he would have been captured, which would have been just devastating. But even as it is, this is really a debilitating maneuver here. First of all, there's nothing. Vasilchikov with a 4 command is going to be really easy to activate every turn, and as long as he's in supply on this next turn, which he's going to be, after that, he's basically got free reign to head in this way, and there is nothing between him and the baggage trains for these corps. That would be huge victory points if he picks it up. Additionally, he's cut MacDonald's command line to Girard off, so now Girard's going to have to roll for command every turn because there's just no path between MacDonald and Girard. Yeah, a lot of problems here in the French center. We've got the Prussians massing along here. We've got some artillery pieces in here that are going to try and start bombarding in this direction. There's just not quite enough strength to attack across this trestle, across this river. Or it's maybe a bridge. I can't really tell the difference between bridges and trestles. Like this apparently is a trestle and this is a bridge. I think a trestle goes across a creek. So this might be a bridge. But anyways, not quite enough power to attack there. Yeah, we're about to do these demoralized units attacking here, which we haven't done. Korf has pulled back to Hermannsdorf to protect that victory condition, but that's going to allow all these units to potentially move up when Lauriston is put in command next turn by MacDonald. So the press south goes pretty well. Up in the north, Sakin actually managed to take Gross-Janowitz away from the 2nd Cavalry. And he's pushed in there and grabbed that. So right now the French only control one of the objectives. That's not going to be enough to win this scenario. However, we've got lots of forces coming down. The rest of Suum's column is coming down from the map. They got half of them on this turn. Half are going to come in on next turn. Just there wasn't enough movement points because of the mud. But they're marching here. This is what the purple is. Suum has been under march orders to get here, and it's been really slow going. But as soon as he can get a raid here, there's a real big possibility that he can sweep down this way. So this sort of grouping of units is going to have to spread out a little bit and try and hold Gross-Janowitz away from sort of a cavalry flank or Suum's column. Now, it's probably going to be a couple hours, couple turns before that happens. And right now, the coalition is sitting pretty. We've also got this stack here, which is a combined arms stack that I was saving in reserve to basically add a punch where I could. And it's within range of York's command. So, they might back off next turn and sit around waiting for an opportunity to counterattack. They'll get that column shift if it's in open ground. But yeah, the coalition doing a really good job of stymieing the French, the weather not helping. We're going to roll weather again this upcoming turn, and there's a really good chance it'll be clear. So that is where we are here at the end of 2 p.m. Well, just a terrible turn of events for the coalition allies. Langeron here had been out of command for several turns in a row, trying to hold this ground. Finally, the French managed to surround him with ZOC, zones of control. They made a 1-to-1 attack. That turned into a street fight, a hand-to-hand street fight in the town here in Hennersdorf. And unfortunately, with the demoralization in effect, it allowed the French to force a retreat on this division here, that is Taliesin, who is under Langeron's direct command. Well, obviously, Taliesin cannot retreat, so he's eliminated. That's 8 strength points right now. He's not permanently eliminated, but he's temporarily eliminated. That's 8 strength points to the losses right now. And that also means that Langeron had to roll to see if he was captured in this fight. And only a 6 would have done it, and wouldn't you know it, he rolled a 6. So Langeron has actually been captured by the French. I'm not entirely certain what that entails. Let's see here. So if he is captured, is he a corps officer? He is a corps officer. His counter goes on the turn track 2 turns into the future. He comes back at the start of the command phase within 1 hex of the friendly unit nearest to his last hex. The officer will have 1 point less than the original initiative, with 1 being the lowest. So he's only going to have an initiative of 1. And wow, that is devastating to the coalition forces in the south. So he would, I guess, he would come in 2, 3. He would come in down here somewhere. So what I'm going to do is I'll probably put a cube there or something. But really terrible outcome for the coalition, and that's going to lead to an advance here. I guess 1 infantry unit can advance, will advance with Penne, and that is a really tight line the French now have as they approach Hermannsdorf down south, which is only now lightly defended by the 1st Cav, Corps 1st Cav. So that's not good. That's not very good at all. We've got the remnants of the 9th Corps here. They're not going to do too much. The Prussians are trying to relieve here, but they don't have anyone to command these units, and so they're going to be reliant on individual unit initiative. We may change that. Now that this has happened, we may bring Blucher back down to at least be able to put several of those stacks into command each turn. Up here, Gerard renewed his attack across the river. The cavalry simply withdrew back into the city, and so the infantry now is back on the other side of the river, but this is a very vulnerable spot. He's open to counterattack here, and he doesn't have the artillery support. Thankfully, Sebastiani's cavalry have come down now from the north, and they're attempting to link up here, and that's going to put immense pressure on this operating area for the coalition. Sacken is going to have to sort of spread out a little bit. York is going to have to reorganize a bunch of these units that he got in position to do this turn to prevent the French from sort of surrounding or separating these two forces. And then Suham's column now is fully on the board. They reached their march objective, which was Donau, or sorry, it was Kleinschweinitz here. And so now they're going to get set up. We've got some advanced heavy cavalry and horse artillery here who've come up to just kind of provide a buffer zone on Sacken. But they are now going to spread out and attempt to retake Gross-Janowitz here, which is worth 5 victory points. They need to take that likely to win the game. So we'll probably see fierce fighting up there, and the coalition now suddenly stretched very thin along the river, and they've had a bunch of things go against them. So we are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4.5 turns to go. So still some time to recover, but it's going to take some major reorganizational effort from Blucher. So Gerard's attack across the river has actually turned course a little bit. Simmer was forced to attack into this town hex at really low odds, 1 to 2, I believe it was, but Gerard is sitting on a big stack of artillery, and they were able to bombard across the river into the town, and they forced these guys to become demoralized. They suppressed them, and in the ensuing combat, there was a hand-to-hand close combat here in the town, and because of that suppression, actually, Simmer managed to drive this big stack of infantry and light cavalry out of the town, and actually managed to entrench himself in there. So really dangerous position now for the Prussians in and around Weinberg. Complete and utter disaster for the French with Sebastiani's corps. He made an attack against this hilltop stack here from the Prussians. They were unfortunately repulsed despite having better odds. And then on the retreat, Sebastiani had to check to see if he was captured. And of course, I fucking rolled a 6. So, yeah, Sebastiani, excuse me, I've been saying his name wrong. Sebastiani is now captured. That is absolutely devastating for the French. He's their best corps commander. He was basically controlling this cavalry advance. That is hugely problematic for the French being able to take Gross-Janowitz. There's only 2 turns left in the game for them. They still don't have Suham's corps in position. And it's looking like this next turn they may have to rush an attack somewhere over here, try and come down here and knock Sacken out. There's been some vicious artillery dueling across this creek here, both sides causing retreats but no losses. And the same is true down here. So Gerard has set up all of his artillery across the bank from Weinberg, and he's been shelling the town anytime that the Prussians are in the region. Well, in this case, he did manage to suppress those Prussians, and that allowed Simmer to, again, who had been knocked out after a counter-assault, to get back into the town through a hand-to-hand combat fight. And yeah, it's just been, this needs to come off, actually, because the combat is over when you're suppressed. So it's just been back and forth here. Gerard's trying to find a way to get this artillery into a spot where it can make actual hex-to-hex attacks. It's just very hard right now. He might be able to do it next turn. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. No, he'd only be able to get them there. which is not useful at this particular moment. So yeah, you might move them up. We were out of command down here with the 5th, so there wasn't much action. There was some artillery fire that knocked the remnants of the Russian 6th off the top of this hill, Breiteberg. Korff is still just hanging out down here. He's going to force the French to come to him, sitting on Hermannsdorf, worth 3 victory points. They haven't really had the ability to do so. This is the first turn that all of these units were going to be in command, but unfortunately, the corps commander was out of command this turn. So the French running out of time to really achieve what they've been trying to achieve. We also have Vasilchikov, who is now set up firmly entrenched in positions here in McDonald. They've been going back and forth. McDonald's artillery and a cavalry unit wiped each other out this turn, so more losses stacking up. I'll show you that. But McDonald is now here in Arnoldshof, and it's going to be tough to knock him out of there, although it's going to be very... he's got to be careful not to get surrounded because there's some cavalry here. These forces are pretty much equal, and one-to-one attacks in this system are actually pretty normal. Here's what we got on the elimination front. The 11th, the Italians, have taken a huge brunt of the casualties, and that has pushed them up, as well as Meunier, pushed them up to almost becoming demoralized, which would be very catastrophic. And then, as you can see, C Corps has taken some losses. The Prussian 1st has taken some losses, and then of course the huge 8-point Russian division here also eliminated, although he potentially could come back into the game. I can't do it yet because Langeron hasn't been in play, but Langeron's coming back this turn, and so he might be able to bring him back. I'll have to check the rules on commanders coming back, but we are... the French have just done their 5 p.m. turn, and now the coalition is going to do their 5 p.m. turn. We're going to play one more where a weather change is possible, and then we're going to do the final turn of the game, which is technically a night turn, but it's actually played out as a day turn. However, no command movement, meaning I believe all the units are going to either have to check their initiative, or there's actually no movement at all, and it's just whoever's in combat is going to fight each other. Movement is by initiative only here. So... We'll check on that and see what happens, but it's the French. It's looking like, unless Suam can get his act together and make an assault that dislodges that hex right there, it's looking like the coalition surviving the onslaught and probably winning the game. They've got 3 points here. They've got 3 points here. They've got 5 points there. That's 11. The French only have 3 here, although they did get, the Prussians did manage to cross the river on the last turn and knock them out in Schlaupe. And so that's pretty dangerous as well. It's really probably going to, if the French don't take another objective, it's probably going to come down to losses and who's got the most losses and if that swings the battle one way or the other. Pretty epic conclusion coming up here. So stick around and we'll finish it out. 3 very distinct narratives taking place across this battlefield right now as we head into the 6 p.m. turn. First of all, the Prussians and Sakin are pushing back this cavalry corps now that Sebastiani has been out of action. They've pushed them back. That threat is no longer there for them collapsing down here. The Prussians here did manage to force back again, and there's a reason McDonald's stacked here, and I'll tell you in a second. Again, Girard's corps managed to force him back across the river and keep Weinberg under their control. So really repulsing the French in the north. The reason McDonald is there is because Vasilchikov finally managed to eliminate McDonald's units, and McDonald basically managed to escape through these woods, running like by himself to rejoin Girard up there. This is a completely horrible situation for the French. They've got Russian cavalry that's can easily just take these baggage trains out, and that's going to be victory points for the coalition. This would be utterly disastrous. So the Girard is going to have to give up this position and fall back as quickly as possible and kind of literally circle the wagons if he can. Obviously, the baggage trains are going to be able to move, but that may not even be enough. It also risks cutting out the 5th Corps out of supply. I guess this turn we're going to check supply before the coalition can move again. So they'll be in supply until the end of the game, but obviously they don't want to lose the baggage train for the victory points. Then down here, the Prussians fared a whole lot worse. They figured they were running out of time to try and recapture Schlaupe. They might as well go for it, right? They might as well try and get those victory points back just to cement the deal. They launched an attack here against Harlot. That was repulsed. As you can see, they have fallen back. And then they launched an attack in Schlaupe against, who is that? That is Lafitte. And that was also repulsed, and they had to retreat across this bridge because Harlot had advanced to this hill, so they had to go this way. There's the baggage train up there. And one of the units, a cavalry unit, was actually eliminated against the bridge. So not going well, continues to not go well down here in the south. But the French, it's been very lucky for the coalition that the 5th Corps hasn't been able to get into command in a regular way in the last couple of hours. So we're heading into the final couple of turns, and it looks like it could go either way. Well, the Prussian pushback has begun here in the final real day turn of the battle. Blücher has come down personally to oversee this assault near Schlaupe. He managed to get across the bridge and actually force Lafitte's brigade back several hexes. So now there's just a single horse-drawn artillery unit defending the victory point town. Not so good for the French, especially because coming up is a special day turn that I don't believe we are going to be doing normal command rules. There was an assault made here on Hennersdorf by these French forces that came down, or this is, I guess, Hermannsdorf, excuse me, by these forces that came down. Unfortunately, it was a pretty bloody exchange. Korf's Corps, Cavalry Corps, still holds the town against all odds. There might be one more chance to bust in there and get that victory objective. But as you can see, the French now being pushed back in several places. Actually, Girard here got surrounded. Vasilchikov came up and surrounded him. Meanwhile, an attack from the Prussians was launched across the bridge, and he is basically only here with a couple of artillery units. They were eliminated. Girard had to relocate over here to where MacDonald is. He wasn't captured, but it was a very nasty attack. So now, basically, this whole line, this whole center section for the French has collapsed. That's going to add some manpower losses to the French army. We'll calculate that in a second. And then up here, able to force what was Sebastiani's cavalry back, the Prussians repulsing. There was a successful or an unsuccessful attack by the French here on Gross. God, what's this town called again? Gross Janowitz, and it was a failure. The French had the advantage, but unfortunately they just didn't roll well. And so now there's really strong position here for Sakin's Corps in the town of Gross Janowitz, both hexes. Suam has got his forces in here. There's been some pretty fierce artillery fire again, back and forth across this creek. But it looks like it's going to be pretty tough for the French now to take this hex, because there's just too many zones of control around here. And then this artillery piece that Sakin smartly put up on the ridge near Gossendau has been causing all kinds of trouble for the French. So that's where we stand. It's looking like the coalition has turned things around here and might come away with the victory. We got one more turn, and then we'll analyze the battle. Well, the French saved their most dramatic performance and their most, I guess, gutsy performance for the very final turn, right as the sun is setting here in the twilight. They rolled incredibly well across the map for unit initiative. So remember, in this final turn, you're not using your leaders. You're rolling for each individual unit to see whether they're in command. They rolled extremely well and in the places they needed to roll it. And because of that, they were able to capture Hermannsdorf, forcing Korf out of the city. Penne's brigade moved in, grabbed this. 3 points for them if they can hold it through the coalition turn. And then up here, Suam finally playing a role in the battle, finally got units arrayed near Gross Janowitz, absolutely obliterated Sakin's Corps, eliminated permanently, or not permanently, but eliminated 2 units, and actually captured Sakin himself, who was here defending the town. A complete disaster, a complete collapse for the coalition up here for 5 points. On the final turn, those unit eliminations and that capture has demoralized what remains of his corps. You've got a reduced strength division here. You've got the artillery piece that was driven off the hill by this infantry unit, which rolled his initiative on a 1 and made the assault. Just extremely, the best for last, I guess we would say there. So they now control 3 of the 4 objectives: Hermannsdorf, Schlaupe, Gross Janowitz. Likely going to lose Schlaupe this turn, but it won't matter, because if they can hold Gross Janowitz, it seems like they're going to win. The unit eliminations over here seem to be favoring the French, it looks like, although, you know, the 11th Corps here has taken 19 losses, so, you know, it's potential that the coalition can earn some victory points there, but I'd rather be the French than the coalition right now, and we'll see what they can do to change that. All right, well, there you have it. The finishing positions of this entire game. Prussian first, holding the center very nicely. Blücher on the final turn managed to take Schlaupe. It was not really in doubt. Personally, he led the attack, eliminated the artillery unit defending that particular space. It's a shame the French couldn't get him activated on their final turn. Korf's Cavalry Corps managed to take back Hermendorf on the final turn as well, drive out Penne's brigade. That was pretty big. And then obviously they also control Weinberg, and then Gross-Janowitz, that was kind of a lost cause after last turn's shattering of Sakin's corps. So the French are going to score 5. The Prussians are going to get 9 for their victory points, and you can see what's gone on here. Really heavy losses on both sides, especially from the French, the 11th? The French 11th Corps was absolutely hammered, and a lot of that was because, that was Girard, that was a lot of because of Vasilchikov's clever cavalry attack. Way back at the beginning when I decided to take that risk and come across Schlauphoff and make the attack, that ended up being the wedge that drove back the French first. They could not hold the center. And in fact, going all the way back to the beginning of the game, you'll remember that Vasilchikov had a 66% chance to come up here and support this particular area with his orders command. But instead, I rolled a 5, I believe. And so he came to Weinberg. So that put him in a position to do that maneuver. And it's really interesting to see the outcome of that at the end of the game, that Vasilchikov was really the coalition's most effective corps commander. I mean, he was harassing enemy lines. His cavalry unit on the final turn ended up destroying both of these baggage train units. Now, unfortunately, he didn't capture them. There's a roll you make. And so there's no victory points for those, it's kind of a shame for the coalition, but it's a good thing that they recaptured these 2 objectives at the end. The coalition was doing really well up here. They held Gross-Janowitz for most of the game. They had a pretty solid defensive sort of formation up here, and it wasn't until Suham's corps managed to get in position and launch an attack that they were really overrun. But all in all, a really interesting sort of turnout to the ebbs and flows of this campaign. I never would have expected that the coalition would have held on down here. The fact that they were able to reorganize, the Prussians to get into an attack position was good. It was good for them. It was kind of lucky as well. They got some good command rolls in the middle of the game to get some of these units who were out of command range moving in. For the longest time, I thought that separating the first into these 2 forces was the kiss of death. It seemed like the French were going to be able to do whatever they wanted, especially down here. And I started to rethink, like, maybe I should have kept the first together and kept them tight as like a big hammer force. But it actually worked out. There was never any momentum the French could get up here. And down here, they held Schlaupe right until the 11th hour, and then Blücher's counterattack drove them off. So it ended up being a pretty good strategy. It made the French commit. They couldn't build up their forces in any one area too strongly because they had so many objectives they had to take, and the Prussians in general pretty savage on the counterblow. So this is where we are. This is the end of Katzbach. A really interesting, fun scenario. I'm really enjoying this system. The more I play it, the more I'm really liking it. I'm actually going to be setting up the 3rd scenario in 4 Lost Battles and playing through that as well. That one's a little bit smaller. Certainly on the French side, there's just a single corps that starts the map for the French, and there's a ton of coalition reinforcements that come in there. So that seems to be like an interesting, maybe even one-sided scenario. But this is a ton of fun. So I would say of the 2 that I've played so far, Katzbach has been my favorite just because of the amount of maneuver, the amount of sort of different hotspots around the map, the different narratives that were unfolding there. The commanders played a huge role in making sure that there was something happening every turn. That was really interesting. Unit quality generally very low, except for Sebastiani's cavalry. But we got some lucky rolls in there and allowed them to do some things. The leader capture in this one was a lot more vicious than in the first scenario. And I should be mentioned, by the way, that here's the turn track. You can actually so I played the entire thing from 10 a.m. to 7, so that allowed for some of this maneuver. That allowed for the beginning of the game march objectives. But you can also start this scenario at 2 p.m. and just play the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 turns of the battle part of the scenario. So if you don't want to do sort of the prelude maneuver stuff, you can do that. I actually like the maneuver stuff. I think getting into position, the way that this game has some friction with the maneuver makes it really interesting. It evokes definitely the Napoleonic army organization and logistics. And overall, I for people saying that the combat table is just push-pull and what have you, certainly a lot of losses over here, right? We're talking about significant unit losses on both sides. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These are unit losses as well. I'm just marking them for the morale. I mean, we had probably close to 10 unit losses per side. So it's not exactly like the combat table is not bloody. There are things that can happen that can cause the table to be bloody. And really, it's all about your positioning and, where you're attacking, if you're surrounding, that kind of stuff. So I'm going to check out the points, and I'll come right back and tell you who won the scenario, because it's really hard to tell from this board state. Well, okay. I've calculated it up, and it actually was a very, very close battle based on the number of points. So first of all, the losses for both sides. We had 32 losses for the coalition, 30 losses for the French. No victory point exchange there. Pretty even on both sides. Captured leaders, the points that that both sides got: 5 for the coalition for Sebastiani, 3 for the French for the 2 leaders they captured. It's equal to their command rating. Obviously, capturing Sebastiani was huge. He's worth 5 points. And actually, that ended up being the difference in the game. Sebastiani's unlucky capture and that attack that he launched over here about 2/3 of the way through the game. So no victory points there. Then demoralized formations. So the coalition had 2 formations demoralized in the game. That was 8 points to the French. The French only had 1 demoralized formation. That was Gerard's 1st corps. 11th Corps, excuse me. So that was 4 points there. And then victory point objectives. The French got 5. The coalition had 9. And ultimately, I mean, you could say a number of these things through the game, but the final score was 18 for the coalition, 16 for the French. So a very narrow victory for the coalition. It says, well, there's a VP ratio. You divide the French by the coalition VP total. And what is that? That would have been 16 divided by 18. Yeah, so 16 divided by 18 gets you about 1.125, which according to the victory chart is a coalition marginal victory. And I would argue that this was a coalition marginal victory. It was very narrow, very close throughout most of the game, and it really was that final turn, whether it was Sebastiani being captured, whether it was the final push on the turn to get back Hermendorf and Schlaupe, that probably sealed the deal for the coalition there. And yeah, here we are at the end of Katzbach. History is preserved. It was a coalition victory. I think in the actual real life battle, I think the coalition probably won a little more decisively. But you know, that's what you get when you put an inexperienced novice and in the command of these armies. So there you go. That is it. I hope you enjoyed this video. We're gonna play some more of this. Hope you're not tired of it. I think it's a really fascinating system. It's very engaging to play, even solo. And we're going to set up, I believe the next one is Denowitz or Kulm. I think it might be Kulm. We'll set it up and I'll come back and show you that. Thanks for watching.